Welcome back to the channel, folks, for another episode of Field Botany, where today being the 25th of July 2026 in Season 2, we look at a discrete and nondescript burglar of grassland pathways. The plant of today is a hemiparasitic plant similar to that of yellow rattle. The plant which we are looking at today is known as Red Bartsia, otherwise known as Odontites vernus, and this is a plant in the family Orobanchaceae, or put simply, the broomrape family. So let's get started and describe this plant using botanical illustrations, field photographs and video footage taken in the field. Red Bartsia is a fairly nondescript, low-growing, herbaceous annual perennial growing 30 to 40 centimetres high. As we can see, the plant divides considerably to form inflorescences of upright, drooping spikes, which consist of pale purple flowers which blend into the grassy background. The flowers on the spike are one-sided and are generally arranged on the drooping side. The individual florets on the plant's inflorescence consist of 4 petals, and they present as bilobed, that is to say they have an upper lip and a lower lip and form a tubular corolla. The flower is therefore zygomorphic or bilaterally symmetrical, and this can indicate host-pollinator relationships with things like the long-tongued bees. Here we see one such example, which is the Red Bartsia bee or Melita tricincta. Other pollinators are of course available. We'll deal with the reproductive structures of the floristics in a short while, but sufficient to say it has 2 stamens in the upper hood, 2 long and 2 short, and 1 fused carpel which projects. The ovary of this particular plant is best described as superior, meaning it is above the other floral part. Attention to detail. In this shot we managed to catch some eggs, possibly of a shield bug, for 3 reasons. A distinct smell in the grass usually indicates their presence. They are usually laid in multiples of 14 or 28 batches or clutches, and they have an operculum or lid and are of the right size. The stems of Red Bartsia are hairy, 4-edged and often branch, and they often have a reddish tint. Leaves. The leaves of Red Bartsia are hairy, lance-shaped and typically 3 centimetres long, with 2 to 3 blunt teeth along the edges or margins. They grow in opposite pairs and clasp onto the stem, and therefore do not have a leaf stalk and are sessile. So this takes us neatly to the business end of Red Bartsia, its roots and the principles of parasitism. Plant parasitism resolves into 2 types: holoparasitic, meaning it has no chlorophyll and takes all of the nutrients from the host plant, such as in the case of broomrapes, and it follows no chlorophyll, no leaves. In the following slides we see an example of a holoparasite known as toothwort or Lathrea squamaria, which is a common parasite of trees and shrubs. In the meantime, back to hemiparasites. Hemiparasites partly derive water and nutrients from the host plant, but does have chlorophyll, and these include such plants as Red Bartsia, yellow rattle, yellow Bartsia, common eyebright, lousewort and common cowwheat. The following slides depict 2 hemiparasitic plants: yellow rattle or Rhinanthus minor, which we've covered on our playlist, and common eyebright, Euphrasia vulgaris. Okay, I hear you ask, how does the parasitic plant Red Bartsia get the goodies from the host plant, the Poaceae or grasses? Well, the answer to that question, put simply in a nutshell, is by a specialist structure known as a hostorium, which locates itself under the influence of signals on the root structure of the host plant. It therefore follows that this parasitic plant can create preferential gradients from which water and nutrients can flow via the hostorium into the parasitic plant if required. Well, if truth be known, nothing in life is that simple, and we illustrate some of the subsoil secrets in relation to the hostoria in terms of the events and sequences in its development in a typical broom rape or holoparasite. You may recall from the yellow rattle episode, if you have watched it, how the hemiparasites can be used to control or suppress the growth of grasses and allow the wildflowers or forbs to establish in a meadow setting, thereby increasing biodiversity. So, in the meantime, let's take a look at the rosy face of Red Bartsia in the field. Okay folks, welcome back to the channel for another episode in Field Botany. Where today being the 26th of July 2026, in season 2 of our field videos, we're looking at a plant known as Red Bartsia or Odontites vernus, which is a plant in the family Orobanchaceae. Now, the general form of the plant is that it consists of a dull, upright, purple red flower spike, which is one-sided, and a square upright stem. The plant grows to a height of 30 to 40 centimeters, more often than not 30 centimeters, and it is a plant which likes poor or low quality soils and is a ruderal. Consequently, the habitat that we see this plant in, as is in the case today, along the disturbed pathway of a clay earth path, is often roadsides, waysides, railway cuttings, road verges, quarries or gravel pits, it being a ruderal, and that is the general habitat that the plant is found in. However, the most interesting feature of Red Bartsia is the fact that it is hemiparasitic. That is to say, it can derive water and nutrients, should it need them, from the grasses around it because of the low quality soil. So Red Bartsia is quite an unusual plant. In terms of its pollination, it has its own distinct bee, which is the Red Bartsia bee. So that's the plant in outline for the purposes of our field introduction. Let's now take a closer look at the botany of the plant in more detail. To recap on habitat, Red Bartsia is an annual hemiparasitic herb of short trampled grasslands, roadside verges, railway cuttings, sand pits, quarries, edges of arable fields, gravelly and rocky seashores, salt marshes, neglected or derelict waste ground and other disturbed ground, often with low fertility soils. In today's footage we can see the plant located along a clay verge of a well trampled pathway in acid grassland. Well worked or disturbed soils allow the root systems of these plants to spread effectively. Let's take a brief look at the botany in the field before looking at the macro content of the flower. Okay folks, I'm conscious that I'm a little bit out of shot. I think it's more important that we look at the flower structures, given that they are so small, the flowers being 1 and 5 millimeters in length. So you're probably best looking at the plant with one of these, which is a magnifying loupe or a magnifying lens. So I'm going to attempt to do a brief root to flower head of the plant off the top of my head. So as we pointed out, Red Bartsia is an annual, so it will make its way from the soil, and it does so in the form of a solid, rigid, hairy, square-sided stem, which we can see here. And in this plant here, which has been cut when the path has been mown, we can see that it is a woody, square-sided stem. As we move up the stem, we can see it does divide into various flower heads, and we'll cover those in a moment. So back to our plant in situ. What can we say about the leaves? Well, I don't know if the camera is picking out, because these are quite small leaves. But here's a little specimen here. The leaves are basically opposite, and they will alternate up the stem at right angles. The leaves are by and large hispid, meaning they are bristly and rough, and they are sessile, that is to say, they are attached to the stem without leaf stalks, or sessile. So that is the leaves, which are also toothed in terms of their edges. Let's just have a look at that, and we can see that the leaves are to some extent toothed, although these appear quite smooth. Okay, so as we move up into the flower heads, first thing we can note is that the flowers are generally one-sided and drooped over. So the flower heads tend to have the purple flowers, which are dull red or purple, on one side of the flower spike. What can we say about the contents of the flower head? Well, the flower is composed of 4 petals, and it has 2 lips. The upper lip, or concave hood, and the lower lip, which is composed of the 3 remaining petals, which enables the pollinator to land. And that very often can be a long-tongued bee, because the flower structure forms a tube in relation to the sepals behind it. So it's very much reliant on insects with relatively long tongues. And Red Bartsia has its own distinct pollinator known as the Red Bartsia bee. So that is the general botany of the plant. Stamens, they consist of 4, and they tend to project outward from the upper hood. So they extend outwards from the upper hood. So that's a brief description of the botany of Red Bartsia. Red Bartsia is a plant of low fertility soils where it exists as a hemiparasite on the roots of grasses. It is an annual, often common where found, and it prefers dry conditions and full sunlight. This herbaceous annual grows to a height of between 10 and 40 centimetres with pinkish red purple flowers. It's a plant of dry meadows or well-drained grassland, and as pointed out is a member of the Orobanchaceae or broomrape family. Inflorescences are long, leafy and one-sided racemes that are terminal on both the stem and the side branches. They feature small tubular flowers which are approximately 8 to 10 millimeters long. Each little floret is bilaterally symmetrical or zygomorphic, and the corolla has a small flower tube. Each little floret has 4 petals and is bilobed, that is to say it has an upper lip and a lower lip with a small flower tube at its centre. In this profile shot we can see the upper lip, lower lip, the corolla tube and the 4 hairy sepals which are fused at the base. So, to summarise, Red Bartsia has 4 protruding stamens from the upper hood. They are 2 long stamens and 2 short stamens. It has 1 stigma on a long protruding style, and it has 4 hairy sepals fused at the base. The following images show a generalised flower dissection of a typical floret, indicating the structures previously indicated at various rotations and views. Can you identify them? Red Bartsia can be seen flowering throughout the months of June and September, and it is fairly widely distributed across the United Kingdom. Finally, the vegetative characteristics. The leaves of Red Bartsia are hairy or hispid, lance-shaped or lanceolate, and typically 3 cm long, with 2 to 3 blunt teeth along the margins. They grow in opposite pairs and clasp onto the stem and are therefore sessile. Red Bartsia, or Red False Bartsia, is known by a number of common names: red eyebright, eyebright cowwheat, coxcomb, hen's gorse, poor robin, sanctuary and twiny legs, and, as pointed out, is a member of the family Orobanchaceae, or the broomrape family. Perhaps the question arising is why Bartsia, and the answer is simple. It was named after Johann Bartsch, a German physician living between 1709 and 1738, who was attached to the science of botany and who communicated with Linnaeus over the Orobanchaceae, and Linnaeus named the genus of the plants after him as a tribute. The Latin binomial is fairly straightforward, with the term odontites meaning connected to or associated with tooth or teeth, as attributed by Pliny. The suffix vernus means from spring or youthful. So folks, let's take a few moments to allow the plant to speak for itself. Well folks, that's it from me on Red Bartsia, the second of our hemiparasitic plants. Once again, thank you very much indeed for watching. You can further consolidate this knowledge by looking at the 5-minute family playlist and the Family Orobanchaceae when released. If you have liked or enjoyed this video or found it interesting or educational, please like, share and subscribe to help the channel become successful. In the meantime, all that remains to be said, in the words of Maggie, our international symbol of floral appreciation, is get outdoors and find these hemiparasitic burglars of grassland for yourself.